Today, we're going to dive into why Putin's Air Force has largely been unable to achieve its objectives in Ukraine. The case of the missing VKS, that's what the Russian Air Force is called. And we're going to talk about the different systems that the West has exported to Ukraine that has likely kept a lot of these Russian fighter pilots, helicopter pilots, close attack pilots on the ground. We're going to dive into those specific systems, and then we're going to dive into some limitations that might have kept Russia from achieving air superiority. From all my time of being an F-15E combat fighter pilot, F-16 Thunderbird pilot, I dove into the doctrine. I became one with that doctrine at different leadership courses, different air superiority courses through the U.S. Air Force. And the biggest thing, guys, is you have to establish air superiority to achieve your objectives quickly. It's essentially a massive wave, a large force that goes in with lots of different jobs. Each fighter unit is going to have different jobs. And at the end of the day, Russia has been unable to launch large force suppression of enemy air defenses and lots of other missions that they would have hoped to have done. So we're going to talk about why that likely is the case, and we'll talk about the weapons they're using, the strength of their air force, and what we can expect moving forward. Let's take a peek at this ejection video of this Su-25, this frogfoot. It's basically the Russian version of the A-10, and we'll talk through what's happening after we watch it full speed. Woo! Yeah, there goes the ejection. Nice pitch up by the pilot, and then watching your jet crash near the tree line. Everybody knows where you're at. You basically look like a you-know-what in sweatpants. That's not what you want to be doing. Oof, big grunt from the pilot. We would all make that sound. No pride hurt there. At the end of the day, this pilot, the fact that they survived is great. And in my opinion, when enemy pilots survive, I like it because then they can get another jet and then I can shoot them down again. All right, so stepping through this video slowly, you can see the HUD's out. This thing's an expensive glider at this point. The screens are out, so it's gotten shot a little while back. And then he pitches up and the thing just essentially disintegrates. So there's obviously some significant battle damage to this Su-25. Low altitude strikes, likely what this pilot was up to, doing some strafing, doing some rocket runs, dumb bombs. And we'll talk about why dumb bombs are a big thing now in Russia. But then they hit the ground and it's off running. As soon as you hit the ground in this case, you got to get away from that tree line. But now let's talk about what likely came from a tree line a few miles back and why that Russian pilot was trying to get out of there as fast as they could. Let's talk about the FIM-92 Stinger missile. That is a portable shoulder-launched missile used by the U.S. and has been exported to Ukraine. These Stinger missiles are nothing to mess with. And when aircraft are operating low altitude, it's something that we would think about consistently. When I flew in combat, I would constantly be thinking about the fact that there could be man pads, which are shoulder-launched anti-aircraft weapons, and they're highly effective against fighters at low altitude, especially a slow-flying fighter like that Su-25 or an A-10, but they can go up against fast movers as well. But going up against helos is kind of the bread and butter. These things can reach out and touch combat aircraft in a way that a lot of systems cannot. They use infrared tracking. There's all kinds of different ways for this thing to make sure that it ruins the day of these close attack pilots. And at the end of the day, when you're planning a mission, you have to know that if you're going low, especially in Ukraine, that there will be man pads. Man pads have likely kept many Russian pilots from going in and executing missions. And when they do execute missions, it's probably always in the back of their mind that one of these Stingers could reach out and touch them. And the sweet spot for these Stinger missiles is somewhere below 10,000 feet. So as you can see, that Su-25 was well below that. They're probably around 1,000 to 2,000 feet doing some sort of low altitude bomb drop, potentially rockets or strafe. So they were in the shoot me, kill me zone. And at the end of the day, you're not going to escape a Stinger missile being down there. The range of these things is somewhere between 3 to 10 nautical miles, so not extremely long legs, but that's not really what it's made for. It's made to be sitting there with these army units in Ukraine, and they get a notification from an early warning radar, or they could hear something going on. And it's really the fact of being an athlete at that point. Think about this. So you're in a trench, you're getting shot at, there's snipers everywhere, there's drones that want to kill you, and you get a notification that you got an aircraft inbound to your position. It's 8 nautical miles away. You've essentially got 2 minutes or less to make your plan, and you have to get that Stinger missile ready probably within seconds. So you get the Stinger missile out, get it turned on, you get it ready for operation, you go to a position of advantage, which could be outside the tree line, likely, so now you're a target as well. And then you have to get that Stinger missile off. So the strategies and tactics of these infantrymen in Ukraine, tip of the hat, because you got to have cojones of steel to go out there and launch one of these Stinger missiles. But that is likely what took down that Su-25. So that's the near rocks. As fighter pilots, we like to talk about the nearest closest threat. So that's the nearest threat to these Russian pilots as they go in and execute these missions. Let's talk about a further out threat that could actually keep them from taking off altogether. And that is the Patriot missile battery. The Patriot missile battery is an incredibly capable missile system from the United States that operates right now as we speak in Ukraine. This thing can reach out and touch targets up to 100 nautical miles away. But at the end of the day, this thing will make any aviator shake in their boots, knowing that Patriot missiles could come after them. So that is probably another reason why we haven't seen these precision strikes from the VKS. Russia has shown that they prefer to use cruise missiles, other rockets and weapons instead of using their fighter jets. But as of the time of this video being made, unclassified sources have shown that Russia has lost about 25% of their air force. That includes all different platforms from all the different mission sets. So they started the Russia-Ukraine war with around 4,000 fighter jets, cargo planes, helicopters, and now they're down to roughly 3,000. So whatever is being done to them, and that is not just the enemy, it could be pilot error, could be mechanical failures, but also combat losses, have shown us that the Russian VKS is really taking a hit. So we saw the video of the Su-25. That's one of Russia's close-in attack aircraft that's going to operate a lot of these strikes. Let's talk about a few of the other jets, and then we'll get to what has likely kept the Russian Air Force from being effective in establishing air superiority. The Su-30 is a multi-role fighter. This was used a lot in Syria. And this is likely a fighter that's flying a majority of the sorties for Russia. This thing is very capable. It's a multi-role fighter. I would equate it to an F-15E. It does the same mission as the F-15E and the F-16. So this is likely one of the more capable aircraft, and it's likely got pilots with some of the most training. From unclassified sources, it's clear that Russian fighter pilots get less than 100 hours per year, but I would guess with the focus on the Su-30 in the Russian Air Force, that they focus on getting these pilots the most. So if the top end of that is 100, 110 hours, the Su-30 pilots in the Russian Air Force are probably getting the vast majority of those just because of the versatility of the Su-30. There's certain adaptations of the Su-30 that actually have thrust vectoring. Likely a lot of those are not the focus. Likely a lot of the Su-30s that are flying missions are operating in pairs. So they're not operating in large force exercises, but think of a flight lead and their wingmen loaded down with probably 6 bombs each going out and taking down specific targets. But those bombs are likely not precision bombs, and we're going to get to that in a second. Then the Su-34 is likely operating as well. That is a long-range strike fighter, so I would equate that to even bigger than an F-15E, and this thing is essentially a bomber. It is huge. So this thing can be loaded down, single ship likely, maybe a 2-ship. It could go out and strike pre-planned targets. And then the Su-35 is Russia's 4++ jet. So this one has the latest avionics, potentially the best ability to communicate with ground parties, but that is another lacking operational function of the VKS. The fact that their communication with ground parties is not seamless, but maybe the Su-35 has the ability to communicate with them the best just because it has the most updated avionics suite. And then you got the Su-57, so this one kind of hangs back. Russia doesn't want to lose any of these. Likely this thing is completely painted and seen as soon as it takes off by Patriot missile batteries and other radar systems in Ukraine, so Russia knows that. They don't want to lose these things. They're expensive. They probably want to continue to test certain sensitive avionics on these for their next generation fighter as well. The stealthiness of this is the best out of the Russian fleet, but again, it's going to be painted by pretty much every Western radar that has been sent to Ukraine by Europe and the United States. So it's really not a stealth platform that can go in and exert its will. If it could, it would have already. And again, air superiority has not been taken by Russia, but this would be their air superiority fighter. So ideally, in an ideal world, this thing wouldn't be seen. It could go in, it could launch standoff weapons, it could be fitted with certain bombs to strike strategic targets inside Ukraine, but that is just not in the cards since the radars that are operating against the Su-57 are so good. And hey, it's worth saying, Ukraine hasn't established air superiority either. It's a contested region, but with a force as large as Russia's VKS going up against a force as small as Ukraine's, I gotta give the edge to Ukraine here. The fact that they've been able to hold off such a formidable enemy and not let them get air superiority, it speaks to the technology, it speaks to the partnerships, and it speaks to some of the tactics that those infantrymen that are grabbing that Stinger missile, or those Patriot radar battery operators, or some of the other weapons that are operating in the contested areas. The way that this is keeping Russian pilots on the ground is something that just can't be understated. Okay, now let's focus on some of the things, the reasons why the Russian VKS is essentially stymied. And one of those is PGMs, precision guided munitions. So if you are launching a fighter wave, you want precision guided munitions because who else is on the ground? Friendly forces. You've got battalions of Russian soldiers operating throughout the front lines. So if you don't have precision guided munitions, and you're dropping dumb bombs, well, there's a chance that you don't hit the right coordinates, you don't hit the right targets because it's solely based on target study. It's solely based on that pilot in the heat of the moment while they're thinking of man pads, dropping dumb bombs on specific targets. Those targets could be confused. Different troop formations could be confused. So, not being able to load precision coordinates into a weapon because of the lack of semiconductors in Russia, run out of a lot of these precision guided munitions. They used a lot of them in Syria. And at the end of the day, they are very short on this stockpile. Some of the Su-34s, those more advanced strike fighters that I told you about, there's a strong chance that those guys have PGMs, but some of the other strike forces with Su-30s, Su-35s, they likely don't have these. So if they don't have these, it might be better to just keep your jets on the ground, launch some sort of a cruise missile so that you're not risking your troops that could be hit by friendly fire. And then that leads me to my next point. Russia has a low ability to do large force exercises. So they don't typically operate with a lot of partner nations. There are a few that they operate with, but their ability to perform large force exercises is extremely low. And we saw that during the first days of the Russia-Ukraine war. We saw Russia target specific radar sites, SAM systems, and things that you would think would clear the way for the VKS to go in and just wreak havoc with precision guided munitions. But they didn't do that. And a lot of that is because of the communication between the different forces inside the VKS. So in Western alliances and NATO, a lot of times you have certain countries that will take on entire roles, suppression of enemy air defenses, and then you have pre-planned strike targets that can be delineated to lots of different units. And that is the way you operate a large force exercise. And a big part of that large force exercise is deconfliction of aircraft. So having the ability to communicate effectively while airborne, altitude blocks, there's so many different things that go into deconfliction. If you don't have the practice with it, it's a scary situation. I've been up in airspace with 100+ aircraft, and with all the training I had, it was still a scary situation because you're essentially just a few wrong moves away from smashing into another formation of aircraft. So you have to be on point on your game, and you have to have seen it multiple times before. Executing it for the first time in combat is just going to be a you-know-what show. And then just the final thing I'll say is the amount of training, the hours that the pilots are getting, especially the fighter pilots in Russia, their ability to maintain their aircraft and get pilots 150, 160 hours is just not there. And for me, when I was flying fighters, if I had less than 150 hours in a year, I felt completely unprepared. A lot of times spinning up for combat, we would get 200, maybe 250 as we prepared to go down range and fight. So these Russian pilots not having that, that could be leading to a lot of the crashes that we've seen, but also mechanical failure. If Russia doesn't have the maintenance personnel to be extremely sharp with these old aging fleets of jets, it's going to be a disaster zone. So not only can you not execute combat, but you can't even get up for training. And that was one thing that I'll say when it comes to the maintainers of the F-15Es, the F-16s, all the maintenance personnel that I worked with, it essentially enabled the US military to be the fighting force that it is. Because those men and women turning wrenches gave us the ability to get airborne and go up and crush it, not only in training, but then to use that experience to go into combat. And that's something that the VKS is lacking. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Go ahead and dominate the like button, subscribe to the channel. It turns out only about 11.5% of you all are subscribed to the channel with the millions of views. So if you would just subscribe literally over the next couple months, we could get the channel to 1 million subscribers, and then I could do these videos basically every day. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate you. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next video. Have an awesome day.